morning to everyone hearing our podcast Wonder Time. Have you been curious, folks? Today is the day you will finally understand completely Hegel's master-slave dialectic through two great examples.
Isabella is right. This dialectic even confused me. But after seeing V for Vendetta and reading an amazing poem called Ozymandias, I totally got it. The thing with these two masterpieces is that they revolve in the idea of power, leadership, independence, but also on the weaknesses, fears, and eventually destruction of us, human beings.
In case you were not in our last podcast, or you don't remember about the master-slave dialectic, we will refresh your minds. This dialectic, as some of you might remember, is pretty mind-blowing actually. The dilemma is portrayed through a master-slave relationship in which one person gives in to the other. What does that even mean? Well, have in mind that in this relationship there is one individual who values liberty more than life, and this individual is known as master. Meanwhile, the individual who values life more than liberty is known as slave. Oof, kind of harsh, don't you think?
Yes, Isa, this even makes us realize that the slave is dependent on the master. That is why he or she is not free. But what about the master? Do you think he or she is actually free? I mean, the slave is the one who is working for the master, and it is thanks to the slave that the master has power, commodities, and wealth. What will happen if the slave stops working for the master? This makes us question, who is really dependent on who?
It seems that the roles have inverted. Slave becomes the master becomes a slave. What?
Okay, relax, Isa. Remember, we got this. Maybe it is time to introduce examples we promise. Let's start with V for Vendetta, which is the modern one. As you might remember, the dialectical relationship is explained through three different stages: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. In V for Vendetta's movies, the thesis represents the battle for the recognition of freedom between two certain figures, the conciliar and the English people. As the movie goes by, we identify that the conciliar represents the master and that the people are the slaves, since at the beginning of the movie the conciliar and his government are the ones who have power and enjoy the comforts and wealth that the English people are providing them through their hard and constant work.
So far, you think that the Chancellor is absolutely the main power of the movie, right? His constant acts of intimidation have characterized his figure as the bravest, strongest, that doesn't depend from anyone and that is willing to give his life rather than his liberty. But the tables turn, folks, and that is when the antithesis come through. Since as you might or not have noticed, the Chancellor highly depends on the people in order to satisfy his needs. Yep, you heard that right. So basically, in the antithesis, people realize that their best weapon is their work and the techniques acquired to them. And at the end of the movie, we can notice that the English people were not afraid to die anymore. They realized that liberty was in fact more important than life. Now the Chancellor is in trouble. He's weak and vulnerable. See, folks, that's what happens when you don't know how the tools that benefit your own state function.
As an extra fact, did you notice that thanks to the revolution that V started, the English people finally recognized the power that they have over the government? Thanks, V.
The process is not over yet, folks. The last one is a result of the thesis and antithesis, the synthesis, which shows the resolution into master and slave. In this stage, the people need power and capacity of self-govern, while the government must learn to dominate the workforce to satisfy himself without depending on others. So, the result of the synthesis is that both the slave and the master recognize themselves as free and autonomous individuals, owners of themselves and their own creations. And we do see this in the movie. After the revolution happened, what a beautiful ending.
Ending? Well, for Hegel, this is not the end, since he does not consider that the final conciliation between master and slave indicates the end of the movement, since each synthesis is a new thesis which implies the possibility of a new conflict. Ugh.
Okay, you are right. Now let's talk about the poem, shall we? You might be wondering how can we relate an old poem with Hegel's master-slave dialectic? Well, folks, you will be amazed. If you don't know about this poem, it was written by one of the greatest romantic poets in history, Percy Shelley. Yes, the husband of Mary Shelley. Before any poem analysis, it is important to identify its keywords, since these are the ones that get stuck in our heads and therefore help us analyze it in an easier way. In this masterpiece, I identified the following keywords: antique land, colossal wreck, boundless and bare, among others.
Okay, Vale, don't get too excited. I think that's enough. Well, my curious minds, if you haven't noticed, this sonnet seems to return us to history, specifically to one of the most ancient cultures, the Egyptian culture. We know this because Ozymandias is a Greek name given to the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II, one of the most important pharaohs in the story of Egypt. So, to summarize this poem, we can see that the lyrical voice of the poem meets with a traveler from an antique land who describes the broken statue of the pharaoh found in the middle of the desert. The description of the statue indicates the fragility of human power, of life, and it reminds us that nothing, not even power, could last forever. See? We already found the theme.
All leaders would eventually pass, and all civilization would eventually fall. Damn, that is deep. Maybe you, my curious minds, are wondering, what does this even have to do with Hegel master-slave dialectic? Well, this dialectic explains also the human, social, and historical connotation. That is why it became a useful tool to interpret history, specifically the class struggle that is in it. So, since this sonnet took an inspiration, a historical figure, we can start noticing their relationship. But that is not all, of course. Through the metaphors used throughout the poem, like colossal, and the personification like sinner of cold command, we can identify that the statue of Ozymandias represents power, legacy, and command, and as a result the figure of the master.
And then we have those who served and worked for him. Yes, we're talking about the slaves, who prefer the life rather than the liberty. Everything here is pretty predictable, right? Well, enjoy it while you can, because this is an analysis within Hegel's Dialectic, and there's nothing predictable about it. So, between the third and fourth line of the poem, we can identify that the massive stone statue that lies on the desert sand is damaged and broken, since the face is half buried. Nevertheless, the traveler can still see the frowning gesture, the wrinkled lip, and the clear face with sneer of cold command, which basically gives us an impression that Ramses II was an upset man who ruled with a lot of pride.
Yes, Isa is right. If we notice the conciliar from Before Vendetta and Ramses II aren't totally the same kind of leaders. Between the 8th and the 11th line, we can identify that even though the pharaoh mocked his people, his heart was not bad at all, since he fed and cared for them. Of course, according to Hegel, we can understand that the resources which allowed him to feed the population were obtained from his slaves, which were the ones that produce and transform matter into useful stuff. Remember what was written on the pedestal? Well, this allows us to understand more about Ozymandias' personality. He is ordering those who see him to look upon all that he has created. It's like a kind of warning to other leaders not even think that they can accomplish what he had done.
The ironic part is coming through. So this ruler introduces himself as the most dominant leader of all times, but in the last lines, we notice that ironically his own statue is now grounded by the great force of nature. The leader is gone, and so his empire. The words decay and bear shown in the poem demonstrate how powerless the pharaoh has become.
So ironic! You, my curious minds, might be wondering how Ozymandias and everything that surround him fall apart. Well, Hegel's dialectic will make you understand this final part. The master-slave relationship is a very dependent one, but we notice that the master depends more to the slave, since all the power, commodities, and wealth he gains is thanks to the slave. We acknowledge that when Ozymandias said, "Look at my works," those works are not entirely his, since he did not work on them. We can infer that the statue is falling apart because the civilization that surrounds his power had already ended.
The people have power to keep alive a certain place through the work they do. But of course we need as well a leader that helps us organize ourselves. What I'm trying to say is that the power of the king is also essential to keep up with the union and existence of a nation. As we said in the beginning of the analysis, all leaders will eventually pass and all civilizations will eventually end. Hegel's dialectic makes us think that the lack of mutual cooperation between the master and slave can impact this imminent fall. And well, the synthesis of Hegel interferes here, since both of the leader and the people must understand that opposing to each other is not the proper way to improve. What is necessary is that the leader must learn to not depend completely on his people. Like duh. He needs to participate in the development of his civilization. Also, it's fundamental for him to understand how the tools work and must not expect that the people must do everything for him.
The people must understand that they can have power over the master, so they can govern themselves, hence they must express themselves without fear. This is a way in which a civilization could prosper and be autonomous and free. However, as it was identified in the poem, the barren land that symbolizes the sand represents that an empire cannot last forever, and that, my folks, is what Shelley wanted. He uses an allusion to a powerful ruler in ancient Egypt to show that even someone that is so powerful will eventually fall.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for chatting with us. As always, we will end up with a mind-blowing quote. To be free is nothing. To become free is everything. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Bye-bye. See you later. By the way, sorry for our helium voices. We were just playing and oops, we made a mistake. But, well, bye.